You know, in war, there are moments that even the most elite units have to stop and question themselves. I'll never forget something a former SOG commando once told me in an interview years ago. He said, "We always thought we were ghosts until we met the people who really were ghosts. And today, I want you to follow me back into the jungles of Southeast Asia, where two of the West's most elite forces, America's MACV-SOG and Australia's SAS, came together in a joint mission that would later become a major lesson in modern warfare. Picture this. You're a member of SOG, one of the most secretive special operations units the US ever deployed. You're trained to slip deep into places the map doesn't even dare to draw. You've spent so long in the dark that you believe you understand everything about invisibility, about vanishing from the enemy's eyes. Back then, SOG was known as the Ghosts of the Jungle. They crossed into Laos and Cambodia, slipped through the DMZ, carried suppressed weapons, mastered covert movement, executing missions almost no one outside the unit even knew existed. North Vietnamese forces called them the footprints that never made a sound. But then, they met the Australian SAS, and everything changed. A former SOG operator said his first impression of the SAS was the silence, a silence unlike anything he had ever experienced. They were quiet to the point of being scary, he said. There were only 5 of them. No patches, no ranks, no introductions. Their gear was so minimal that the SOG guys quietly wondered, they're going into the jungle with just that. No greetings, no handshakes, no small talk. It felt like they had already been on the mission long before SOG even arrived. Have you ever met someone who made you instantly feel like you needed to level up? That was exactly how SOG felt in that moment. As a historian, I have to say, to understand the silence of the Australian SAS, you have to look at where they came from. Not modern Australia, but a military tradition that goes back to World War II. These SAS soldiers carried tactical DNA forged in completely different kinds of wars. Desert pursuit missions in North Africa, jungle counter-insurgency in Malaya, covert operations in Borneo. If America's SOG was born from a need for speed, firepower, and rapid extraction, then the SAS was shaped in wars where a single footprint could get your entire team killed. Here's something most people outside military history never notice. Special operations units are shaped, almost sculpted, by their environment. The SAS had spent years training in those very Southeast Asian jungles long before American forces ever arrived in Vietnam. They lived, learned, breathed, and blended into the terrain. To them, victory wasn't about how many bullets you fired or how many targets you eliminated. Victory was about not being detected, about existing right in the middle of the enemy without the enemy ever knowing. And this is what shocked the SOG operators the most. The SAS didn't enter missions like soldiers. They entered like they were part of the forest itself. No heavy radios, no bulky equipment, no talking on the move. Every step, every shift of the shoulder, every breath was a signal. One American officer said, when the SAS moved, they felt more like a single creature with 5 heads than a team of 5 men. What do you think about that? Have you ever worked with someone whose presence alone made you realize how far you still had to go? That's exactly how America's best felt. Now imagine the scene. SOG and SAS begin moving together. SOG follows standard US doctrine, periodic radio checks, controlled pace, occasional pauses for observation. All correct, all by the book. But within minutes, when SOG stopped for a routine check, the SAS was gone. Not moved ahead, gone. gone as if they had never existed at all. A SOG member recalled that when they finally arrived at the rendezvous point, the SAS had already been there for quite some time. Positions dug, surveillance set, not even slightly winded. And that's when the legendary line was born. We thought we were ghosts, but they were the real ghosts. I'm telling this story not just to highlight the differences between these two forces, but to remind you, the person watching this, that in any field, there are always people playing the same game as you, but on a completely different level. No noise, no bragging, no waiting for recognition. They just do the work, and their silence is exactly what makes them powerful. Have you ever had a moment like that? A moment that made you realize just how much you still have to learn? If you have, then you know exactly how a SOG felt that day. When I tell this story, people often ask me, so what's the biggest difference between SOG and the SAS? And I always answer, it's not the weapons, it's not the physical conditioning, it's the philosophy. Think about it. Both units were elite, both fearless, both had survived the harshest battlefields of the Cold War's hottest years. But SOG and the SAS walked into the jungle with completely opposite mindsets. SOG believed in speed, firepower, and preparation. The SAS believed in minimalism, absolute invisibility, and a level of patience that almost didn't seem human. I remember a former SAS soldier once telling me, in a calm, almost casual tone, "If you have to use your radio while moving, it means you messed up from the start." Does that line make you feel a little itchy inside, the way it did to me? For SOG, the radio was their lifeline. How they called for evac, how they requested fire support, how they coordinated when surrounded. So when the SAS said they barely used radios at all, SOG assumed it was just the kind of bragging elite units throw around to sound special. But once they actually patrolled together, they realized it wasn't empty talk. The SAS moved as if they didn't exist. Not a rustle, not an unnecessary glance. Total silence. I know this might sound like romanticizing war, but it's backed by accounts from American advisors. One US captain even wrote, "They moved like water. It was as if the jungle opened a path just for them." Picture this. A mixed SOG-SAS team is moving deep into an area suspected to have NVA activity. It's the middle of the night, fog drifting through the trees, a soft jungle breeze. The Americans stop, exactly by the book, to check direction and run an internal comms check, something they had done 100 times. But when they look up, the SAS is gone. No footsteps, no tracks in the mud, no broken branches, nothing. One SOG member swore he looked down at the map for maybe 2 seconds, just 2. And when he looked up, the 5 Australians had dissolved into the darkness like they had never been standing there. Have you ever had a moment in life where it felt like the world was playing on a difficulty level you didn't even know existed? SOG felt that right then. And this is why I consider that mission one of the clearest examples of what I call philosophical level tactical differences. The SAS weren't just good at hiding, they blended into the jungle. One witness said he stood just a few yards from 2 SAS operators and didn't realize they were there until one of them gently placed a hand on his shoulder to signal a halt. That moment gave him chills. "Not because I was scared," he said, "but because I knew they weren't trying to spook me. They were just doing what they'd been trained to do." Think about that for a second. How can a human being turn themselves into part of the terrain? How can someone melt into the dark so completely that even the person next to them can't see them? The answer isn't technique, it's acceptance. The SAS accepted becoming invisible, from scent control to breath control to eliminating every unnecessary movement. They weren't avoiding making noise. They lived as if the jungle had swallowed them whole. A military psychologist once said, "The SAS doesn't defeat the enemy with firepower. They defeat them with invisible presence." And that creates a terrifying psychological edge. In guerrilla warfare, nothing is more frightening than the feeling that something is watching you, something you can't see. NVA units changed marching routes, altered timetables, even set counter-ambushes, all because they believed something was shadowing them. But they never knew who it was. Ask yourself this: who would you fear more? Someone shooting at you, or someone standing 3 meters behind you, and you never knew? SOG began to feel that difference. They even joked among themselves. If the Aussies don't like you, they could stand behind you for an hour, and you'd never notice. Behind the joke was a very real admission. The SAS was operating on a level SOG had never been trained for. And then came the enlightenment moment. One night, the team stopped on a silent signal from the SAS. The Australians didn't say a word. They didn't explain. They just stood, motionless, like trees. SOG strained their eyes, saw nothing, heard nothing. But 10 minutes later, faint footsteps echoed from a distance, an NVA scout team moving in the opposite direction. The SAS had heard them long before anyone in SOG sensed a thing. And in that moment, SOG understood. They might be elite, they might be brave, but to become a true ghost, they still had a long way to go. As the war moved into its final phase, this weapon, once praised for its mobility and its ability to deliver overwhelming firepower, began to show its limits. On larger battlefields, where the enemy possessed heavier weapons and stronger fire support, it no longer held the decisive role it once had. But here's the irony. Its decline at the end of the war is what finally helped commanders recognize its true value. Not as a war-ending superweapon, but as a tactical tool that reshaped how the US military organized, maneuvered, and fought. Looking back at the entire conflict, this weapon became a symbol of adaptation. When American troops were forced to fight in brutal terrain, harsh weather, and against an enemy fluent in guerrilla warfare, it offered something practical, lighter, easier to deploy, and perfectly suited for fast-paced engagements. Many successful operations weren't won by overwhelming force, but by rapid reaction, and this weapon made that possible. In terms of historical significance, it opened the door to a new mindset. Firepower isn't just about being big, heavy, and powerful. It's about being in the right place at the right time. After the war, this lesson directly influenced how the US designed modern weapons, shifting the focus toward flexibility, mobility, and seamless coordination between units. It didn't become a legend because of destructive strength. It became a legend because it changed the way Americans thought about war. And that is its greatest legacy. If you enjoy deep dives into military history and the weapons that shaped entire eras, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the notification bell so you never miss a new video. Leave a comment and tell me which weapon or battle you'd like me to break down next. Thanks for watching. See you on the next stop in our journey through history.